Hi, my name is Jesse Gandhi. This is the report on Fukushima years later. So, the purpose and objective of this presentation is to discuss the impact of the disaster in Fukushima, Japan, had on the environmental health perspective. So, here are the table of contents. What happened? We're going to go over what happened in Fukushima, the exposure of the radiation, how thyroid cancer was a big health concern, contaminated water, and how that affected the marine animals. Let's go over what happened on Fukushima. On March 11, 2011, a tsunami and an earthquake hit Akuma, Japan, where the nuclear plant was located. 3 of the 6 reactors of the plant sustained severe core damage and released hydrogen and radioactive material, causing an explosion that released hydrogen that damaged the 3 reactors in the building and impeded an on-site emergency response. So the people were told to evacuate and or stay indoors if they lived within 20 kilometers away from the site. So the people that lived in the vicinity of this plant were exposed externally by radiation from the radioactive cloud and ground deposit, and internally from inhaling and ingesting of the iodine and calcium. Mental health disorders were huge, especially PTSD became prevalent since many people were away from their homes and they really were going crazy. They also didn't have that great of healthcare in Japan, so a lot of people that had long existing conditions also did suffer a little bit as well. There were over 15,000 deaths from the disaster. However, most were found to be just from the tsunami and the earthquake. Many people could not escape that. The disaster itself kind of was our long-term effects. One of the long-term effects is actually thyroid cancer. The radioactive iodine from the radionucleotides affected children more than adults because the thyroid glands are actually bigger and their metabolism is quicker in children. So the observed amount of thyroid cancer actually increased dramatically. So when these children became 20, by the age 20 years old, it would actually in fact impacted them more. Females were expected to have like 5 cases, and they rose to 129. And for males, it wasn't any. I mean, it was slightly better, I guess, but even then, it was theirs also increased dramatically by the age of 20 years old. So it did affect them long term. And another reason is the contaminated water. So contaminated water actually was accumulated on the site and has been treated to remove all traces of tritium, which limits any release of potential, treated water to the sea. However, the radioactivity in the ocean is still very strong, calcium. So basically, it's still in the water. It will last a long time. So they're able to get into these big containers. They're able to get a lot of the contaminated water, but it still is growing. The water is still contaminated over for a long period of time, and unfortunately, they're still trying to get all the water into these containers. And until then, marine animals will still be affected by the radiation. The calcium from the explosion actually got into the water, and the phytoplankton absorbed the radioisotopes. So, fish and larger animals eat these phytoplanktons, and it gets into their feces, into their body, and it kind of degrades in there for a long period of time. And calcium-137 isotope actually lasts 30 years in the water. So it's still obviously still there. This was only 8 years ago when this happened, almost. So that will stay in the water and it'll continue to grow. And as you can see here, dolphins and whales were actually found dead on the beach because of radiation poisoning. So it's serious in the animals just as much as it is for the humans. And when I look at it, you can actually see that the incident was huge, but there was no immediate effects or deaths really that were resulting from the acute radiation syndrome. So a lot of people were affected by other reasons of death, but they weren't dying because of the radiation itself. However, like I said, the cancer is always a big long-term health issue especially with the people who are still in that area. Thyroid cancer will still always be an issue. However, also be note that cancer comes from a lot of other sources as well. So they're still trying to figure out if it's a direct correlation or if there's still if it's actually definitive that it is from the radiation. Chances are that it probably are, but can't really. The studies are still going on. And finally, animals. Animals were affected more than humans were just because they didn't have the ability to evacuate from their area, like humans do. So they're in danger of dying as well, like we just saw the dolphins and whales. So, in Fukushima overall, it's, in the time of 2011, it was still, a health concern. It was always a health concern, but I think as the years go by, we find out more about if what's really the real health concerns in terms of cancer and other form of diseases. People in Japan, they're still living well, just away from Fukushima. But the studies are still continuing to go on. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.